Welcome to the Know It's Some podcast, bringing you the widest variety of conversational interviews for a well-rounded perspective on life. Because while it's true, nobody likes a know-it-all, it's also good to know it's some. Here's your host, Steve Platt.
That's right. Welcome back to another episode of the Know It's Some podcast. I'm your host, Steve Platt, and we have a few announcements before we start. One is that we've been added to a number of podcast platforms now. So we're not just on Apple and Spotify or Google Podcasts, but we're on 14 different platforms now. Most recently, we've been added to Pocket Cast, Overcast, Stitcher, Audible, and Amazon. So we're on 14 different ones. If your preferred listening platform does not carry us yet, you need to send us a DM. We're at Know It's Some Pod on Twitter and Know It's Some Pod on Instagram. You're going to want to reach out to us. We'll get on there. But that's all thanks to you guys that we're on pretty much every major platform you can think of. They carry us, and that's due to your support. If you've left us a 5-star review on Apple, amazing. If you haven't, please do so, because that's helping us book incredible, interesting guests like this week's guest. My guest this week is Hana Romer. She is a Marine Corps veteran, served in Iraq. She's also an incredible mother of 2, Marine Corps spouse. Her husband has also served in Iraq. And all I can say about them is that they're role models for my wife and I. They're incredible parents. Their kids are amazing. I hope Sophia grows up to be like their kids. And I am just in awe of her story. You'll hear emotion in her voice and some emotion in my voice during this interview because we touch on some heavy stuff. It's a pretty deep interview, and at the same time, it barely scratches the surface of the obstacles and challenges that face service members and veterans that we must overcome, that a lot of people just don't really even know about or think about. And we didn't really cover her time in Iraq and what that was like. We didn't really cover, much of the PTSD issues that she has had to deal with, or that her spouse has had to deal with. There's a lot we haven't covered in this interview, and it's because no matter how long you talk to somebody, there's gonna be a tremendous amount more that goes untouched, right? So it was a pretty deep interview, probably one of the realest interviews you're gonna hear on this podcast. And yet, like I said, we could have probably talked for hours more. And that's the great thing about veterans is we all have a story. Her story is incredible. Her husband will guest on the podcast down the line, and his story is incredible as well. But all I can say is you guys are in for a real treat. You're going to hear a little bit of what it's like to serve in the military and maybe some of the not so glamorous parts of serving in the military. I think a lot of the listeners who have served will definitely identify with this episode, and I'm very proud of this one, guys, because it's a great friend of mine and a great conversation, and I'm happy to share it with you. So here we go, episode 11, Hana Romer. Hana?
Yep.
Hey, welcome to the Know It's Some podcast. I appreciate you being here.
I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. You and I served together. I actually served under you in the Marine Corps. I was like a lance corporal and a corporal when you were a staff sergeant towards the end of your career,
Yes.
at your end of your active duty career. But when I started this podcast, you were one of the first people I thought of in terms of I really want to get her as a guest.
Oh, that's awesome.
and the reason why is, you are probably one of the most interesting people that I know. You have this incredible story where your life is very unique. You're a military veteran, a combat veteran, and then you're married to an active duty Marine who served in combat as well.
Yes.
So you've seen both sides of that coin. You've been deployed, and then you've taking care of a child while your spouse is deployed.
Right.
Which is very, very unique. Why did you join the Marine Corps? Could you give us a little bit of color about your background, where you grew up and how the Marine Corps came into the picture?
Yeah, so I'm from College Station, Texas. It's a town just north of Houston. If you know anything about college football, it's where Texas A&M is at. And my parents are immigrants from South Korea. They immigrated here back in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know exactly when, but I grew up in a pretty traditional Korean household. If you want to think of Korean stereotypes and like the tiger mom, that was my parents. And so basically, my childhood, they were kind of grooming me for college and getting me ready for success, like going the doctor route, the lawyer route. And I'm a firstborn in
Mm-hmm.
my entire family, like the first grandchild ever, that was born in America. And so I think when I went to high school, I kind of went through a rebellious stage where I was just kind of over it. And I was like, I'm not going to do what you guys want for me. I'm going to do my own thing. And in high school, I started getting interested in ROTC programs. I started looking at them through college. And my parents were at first against it, but because I was like, okay, well then I'm going to enlist. And that was like a hell no for my parents. So their compromise was, okay, if you go to college, then we'll let you do ROTC and then commission. And I actually applied to the Citadel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I applied for the NROTC scholarship my senior year of high school. And I got rejected from the Citadel. And then before I submitted my NROTC scholarship, I started talking to a Marine recruiter, and
they found you.
Yeah. And I knew I didn't want to tell my parents. And so this is my senior year of high school. And this is probably around March. I had just turned 18. And so I didn't need parental consent at that point. So I basically lied to my parents and I told them I did the 1-day MEPS thing where you go to MEPS on a Saturday and you take your ASAP and your physical all in one day.
Okay.
And I told my parents I had a track meet and out of town. And my parents never came to my track meets. So they were just like, okay, whatever. And went to MEPS. Oh, and that's a crazy thing is for my security clearance, not American born citizens, they're naturalized. I needed their naturalization certificates. And so I had to get it from them somehow. I didn't know where they kept them. And so I told I told them I was doing a government project. And I was like, it would be really cool to show my class. And they were like, okay. And they handed me their legal documents that show their citizenship. And I took it to MEPS with me. And
that's pretty smart.
Yeah. And then I broke the news to them probably, I think in May, the month I was about to graduate. Cause I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to boot camp in July. And
they're going to notice you missing maybe for 13 weeks.
Yeah.
And then on.
And it was not good. There was a lot of yelling, and my mom kicked me out of the house for the day. She was like, you need to leave. And, but
oh boy.
Yeah. So that's kind of my backstory on how I ended up enlisting in the Marines. And my parents ended up becoming very supportive. They came to my boot camp graduation, and I think boot camp graduation, every parent, like when they see their kid at the end of a journey like that, there's not a single parent who has never said, I'm not proud of, their accomplishment thus far. And so, and I think my parents kind of knew at that point that I probably wouldn't have made it through college if I would have gone right out of high school. I wasn't mature enough. I had a lot of growing to do. So I think they realized that.
Right. And then, once you graduated boot camp, you ended up as an aviation ordnanceman, correct?
Yes.
And then you went through your schooling and everything. Where was your first duty station? Was it near the near where your parents were, or was it a little further?
My very first duty station was Miramar, California, in San Diego, and couldn't have asked for a better first duty station. It's beautiful there. The base is great. So yeah, that was my first duty station. And I loved it.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, no, that's a great place to be. The weather's beautiful. I mean, you can't ask for a better first duty station. I was lucky enough that the whole time that I was stateside, anytime I wasn't deployed was there in Southern California, and
Oh yeah.
that's you get lucky with that. Other
Yep.
folks get 29 palms or
Yuma.
yeah, Yuma. Where I'm sure you're thrilled to be leaving Yuma right now.
I am.
So that's good. So then a little later in your career, I'm gonna fast forward you
Uh-huh.
quite a bit because I believe you were in Japan, right? And
Hmm.
then in North San Diego County at Camp Pendleton.
Yeah.
Um, you end up meeting your husband,
Right.
who is also a Marine. How did that happen?
So right after I got back from my last deployment to Iraq, I came back and decided that I was going to go on recruiting duty.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but actually, I mean, I did because that's what I needed to get promoted. But
Right.
so before you go on recruiting duty, you have to, you in the Marine Corps, you're familiar with how anytime before you go somewhere else, they make you finish all what we call green side training, which is running your physical fitness test and getting your rifle qualification up to date.
Hmm.
Because on recruiting duty, you won't get to, well, at least the rifle range, you don't get to go to the rifle range for 3 years. So I had to go to the range, and I met my husband on Edson Range at Camp Pendleton. Um, we actually had a mutual friend, and while we were snapping, or I don't know, I don't know who listens to this. So if they're not familiar with the military, I'm like, snapping in
there
is like the
there
week
are only a
before.
couple of veterans so far.
Okay. So the week,
Mostly
so the
civilian.
week before we actually shoot, we practice and get comfortable with the weapon
Hmm.
before we go to the range. So that's what snapping in is.
Yep.
And he came up to me. He's like, "Hey, do you know so and so?" I was like, "Oh yeah." And I looked, and I was like, "Oh, I've seen you." Like I had seen him around,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Oh yeah, hey." And that whole week, and then the week after on the range, he would walk back and forth with me to the armory, and he would wait for me at the armory, and we would just talk. And the process of cleaning weapons is very
Oh.
tedious. Yeah. And but that was a really great time for us to talk, because we would
Yeah.
just be in the armory just cleaning our weapons after shooting, and that's a good couple hours of just
Yep. You're
you
not going
and
anywhere for a while.
yeah. Yeah. And so we started talking, and then we started dating, and then got married like 6 weeks later.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty whirlwind engagement period, right?
Right.
Um let me ask. So having been a combat veteran yourself,
Hmm.
and you were in Iraq, right?
Hmm.
Um then becoming a wife and becoming a mother and being on that side of things, you were still active duty, but
Right.
now you're raising a kid and your husband deploys. What is that like? What are some of the emotions and what was that experience like?
So Nick deployed while I was on recruiting duty, and my daughter was 6 months old.
Mm.
And he went to Afghanistan. That was his first deployment to Afghanistan. And um, that was really hard for me. I now looking back know that I had postpartum depression,
Mm.
but I didn't know it at the time. I just thought I was sad because my husband deployed.
Right.
Because it just kind of, everything in my life was just kind of chaotic. So I was just like, well, I'm feeling this way because obviously, but that probably made it worse. And recruiting duty is also an extremely demanding duty.
Right.
And so I had this 6 month old, and I'm like dropping her off at daycare and running to the office, and sometimes picking her up from daycare and bringing her back to the office so I could finish working.
Man.
Um, Also, I recruited in South Orange County, and the MEPS, which is a processing station when you enlist, was up in LA. And
Oh.
so if we want to get our applicants up there to take their physical, it's a 2 hour drive from where my office was. And so sometimes it was 3 a.m. that I had to wake up to take applicants up to LA. And we take
Through LA
government.
traffic. Like
Yeah. And then we take a government vehicle. So a big thing was, I was like, okay, I have a baby and there's no daycares open at 3 a.m. And I can't put a car seat in a government vehicle. That's illegal. And so I really relied on my team a lot, which also came with a lot of guilt because you're asking somebody to take someone that they're not recruiting up
Right.
for you. And
that's a lot of time.
Yeah. And I was really lucky to have a really great team, but it doesn't mean that I didn't have like an immense amount of guilt for because it's a lot to ask somebody. And also that time driving up to LA is time that you get to bond with the person
that you're recruiting.
And it's their kind of chance to ask them, ask you personal questions and as a recruiter, I would get to know them. Sometimes on the way there, it's like, hey, I didn't tell you this because I was scared, but I smoked weed last week. And I'm just like, okay, well, now we got to turn around because you're going to fail the drug, So I feel like that. Yeah. I feel like that first deployment was when Nick was gone. I feel like that time of my life was so chaotic, and I had a lot of anxiety and depression during that time. And I also kind of feel bad because when I did get a chance to have phone calls with Nick while he was deployed, when he would call me, it's always at random times, obviously, because of the time difference. But we never had a good conversation during that deployment. It was always me just unloading on him about recruiting duty and the baby. And it's like I totally disregarded the fact that he's in a combat zone,
Right.
And so now I feel like I put all this burden, my problems on him, and he's got to think about what's going on at home. But at the time, it was just like, I don't care what you're doing. This is my life sucks right now. And he's like, my life sucks too,
No one can fault you for that because you're a human being and you're going through a lot at that time. You're balancing one of the most stressful jobs in the world with raising a child. You're away from your spouse for an extended period of time, and you're away from your support system, really, because it's not like your parents live down the street and can help out, your sister being there, like you're in a lot of ways on your own with an infant and an incredibly stressful job, like not a 9 to 5 and you can get out at 4 kind of a deal.
I feel like recruiting was the absolute worst duty for me to be at in that time. And it's funny, we're talking about recruiting now because I was just, Nick had a going away party last weekend, and someone was asking me about it. And first of all, I want to say that the office I worked in, the people I worked with, the other recruiters, I had an awesome team. But the duty itself, meaning like the higher ups, like the Marine Corps, as far as recruiting, that's the first time in the Marine Corps I felt like nobody cared about Marines. It was always about the mission. No one gave a crap about, a Marine's mental health or personal lives. It was just, okay, I don't care about what's going on. What do you have for me this month?
That's a terrible thing, but that's the unit leadership's fault,
Oh yeah.
And having good Marines and good good leaders and good officers like your husband, right? That's what's going to make the difference in the lives of Marines.
Yeah.
In the command that you were at, correct me if I'm wrong, but you faced harassment at that same time, actually, really. I mean, that they didn't really have your back at the time.
No. Do you want me to talk about that?
If you're comfortable.
Yeah. So while I was working there was a staff NCO. So he was someone ranked higher than me, but he wasn't directly my boss.
Okay.
So this was during the time when the Marine Corps had like adjusted their tattoo policy for like the millionth time. So I have a tattoo on my left thigh, and they needed to take pictures of it to put in our service record books. And so we all had to show up to headquarters in our PT gear, our workout gear.
Right. So
and
shorts
to
and a
get,
t-shirt kind of
yeah,
thing. Hmm.
to get our tattoos, like a picture taken of any tattoo larger than the palm of your hand. And for females, they were supposed to have a female take the photos.
Okay.
And this guy insisted that he was going to take it because there wasn't a female up there at the time. And he was like, it's no big deal. I'll take it. And it was super uncomfortable. And he takes
Mm.
us back into this back room and he's like touching my leg and like grabbing my shorts up. Like it was, and
nobody else around?
no. And so, and I was a sergeant at the time and I was just
Mm.
like shocked, like dumbfounded. I was like, I cannot believe
Like,
this
is
is
this
happening.
really happening?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I reported it to my sergeant major, and he basically talked me into, there's two ways you can report it. It's informal or formal. If you do an informal complaint, nothing happens to the perpetrator. What happens, they get a slap on the wrist, maybe a little counseling paperwork saying, hey, don't do this again, you know.
Right. But no real consequences.
No. And I found out later that it's because a sergeant major and him would drink on weekends. They're friends. And so he basically, the way it was told to me was, hey, if you do a formal complaint, you're going to ruin this man's career. He's been in the Marine Corps 20 years. He's a father. And, you know, is this really worth ruining someone's life over? And, you know, now he's pulling at my heartstrings. He's like, oh, he's a father. And to this day, that is like my biggest regret, is that I did not go through with the formal complaint, because it makes me so mad when I think about it now, that he retired and got his full benefits and he has daughters. And I'm just like, that was totally unacceptable behavior. And there were other females who had made complaints.
Hannah?
So it shouldn't have been shocking when I reported it, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I was a little bit ostracized by the command for that. And I kind of left recruiting duty with just a lot of hatred with I don't know what you would call it, like the system. Because I love the Marine Corps. I've always loved being a Marine, but I was just like, no one took care of me. And so,
yeah.
And then, you know, we served together and we had some toxic leadership issues. And at that time I was just like, I'm done. Like, this is BS. And, you know, and then I was still, you know, I was dealing with some anxiety and stuff from what had happened on recruiting duty. And I don't think it was so much the act that happened. It was more, I was more traumatized by the fact that nobody like cared.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that was more traumatizing than anything.
It's poor leadership. And you know, I feel like, and I hope that I'm right, that I'm seeing some changes in the right direction here and there, but it's really going to come down to the right small unit leadership. You know, they can put whatever directives in place they want from, you know, 8th and I, but it's going to have to come down to, you know, small unit leaders like your husband. Now, you ended up EASing, which for those who are not familiar, you're no longer active duty. You're now a Marine Corps veteran. But then you're still married to an active duty Marine. So what's that like? Because I'll tell you, I EASed and then I moved to the complete opposite side of the country, and I am completely separated from the Marine Corps in so many ways. You know, I'm active with some veteran groups, but I'm able to kind of walk away. What's it like being around but not having the uniform
on? The first year, I think, when I got out was probably the hardest. And, you know, I think every veteran goes through that transition period. When they get out, you kind of lose your sense of purpose. And I don't know if you felt that way, but it's just like, man, you know, and then you're like, man, did I make the right decision to get out? Like, you know, you're rethinking all your decisions, because you no longer have that camaraderie. And there are just some things about the Marine Corps that you can't replicate, those kinds of relationships as a civilian. And so But for me, because I'm married to an active duty Marine, I had a lot of resentment because he was going to work every day in uniform.
Right.
And that caused a lot of tension in our marriage because Nick is like, you wanted to get out. You couldn't wait to get out. Like the last year you were in, you were just like ready to burn the place down.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't understand what this attitude is now. And he now, we've been through counseling, lots of marriage counseling. And we have, now he knows that there is a transition phase for every veteran.
Yep.
And for me, I was going through that transition. And then I also had resentment because I was just like, well, you get to still be a Marine and do fun Marine things.
Yeah.
And I felt like, and I was a stay-at-home mom for the first 2 years after I got out. And look, it ain't glamorous. It's not glamorous, and there's no recognition. And I always tell people, you don't realize in the Marine Corps how much praise you get.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like you do something good, you even like a letter of appreciation, which we laugh about, but that still feels good when someone recognizes, hey, thanks for volunteering this weekend,
Right.
But that kind of all goes away when you get out. No one is telling you good job and giving you awards. And so when that all kind of disappeared, I didn't realize that I was a words of affirmation love language person until it was gone. I was like, oh man, like no one is telling me great job for keeping your child alive today, And so I think that was like the hardest part. And then also I grew up in a culture in the Marine Corps. It still kind of exists. It's gotten a little better, but military spouses are made fun of and stereotyped. And I used to participate in.
Yeah, I was about to say I've been guilty of it, and since growing up a little bit, I kind of cringe when I think about some of the jokes that I've made.
Yeah, and I participated in those jokes too. And so then I was just like, well, I got out and I was like, I do not want to be a military spouse, and never label me that. And I was very adamant when we went places with Nick for his work. I was like, I just got out of the Marine Corps. I feel like I had a lead with that,
Right.
And because I didn't want to, I didn't want to fall into the dependent category. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be stereotyped like the way I used to stereotype military spouses. And it really just kind of took a couple years of being married to Nick and just kind of following him around with his career, and meeting some pretty incredible military spouses who I was just like, wow, like we have a mutual friend whose wife is a freaking attorney.
Wow.
And she, he's been stationed in California and now they're in North Carolina, and she has had to take the bar in both California and North Carolina like twice because her credentials don't transfer over. And I'm like, man, there are some, and that's just one example, but I just met an incredible network of military spouses, many of them veterans themselves, who are just really doing amazing things and wanting to advocate for better lives for military and service members and families. And I think that has what's kind of made my mind shift a little bit, or a lot, not a little bit, a lot. And I kind of embrace the title now. Like, I enjoy supporting Nick, and then I have my own thing, and just found a cool community of people that are friends.
Well, I know that you're not the type to brag, so I'll let you humble brag a little bit by bringing it up myself. You were awarded Military Spouse of the Year, is that correct?
Yeah, for NCAS Yuma.
That's incredible. Now how did you get involved in the MFAN organization and giving back to the level where you reached that recognition?
So MFAN is the Military Family Advisory Network, and it's another nonprofit. But what I love about that organization and why I got involved is there are so many advocacy groups out there, great advocacy groups for veterans and military families. Some big ones off the top of my head is like the Semper Fi Fund. And so I feel like the nonprofit world is kind of saturated with a lot of advocacy groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's resources everywhere. But what the cool thing about MFAN is we don't do advocacy work. We do research-based work. And then we take that research, and the research is all done peer-to-peer through an advisory board, which I sit on the advisory board right now, through surveys. And then they present those results to advocacy groups or people in Congress who are lobbying for military families. And it's been really cool to be a part of that process and be part of an organization that helps other organizations serve the military community better, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. And
yeah.
And veterans need more support than most people realize.
Yeah.
I've come across, and it's not it's not incredibly common or anything. It's not too bad, but I do come across sometimes civilians who feel, well, look, you didn't do very much, or you already got your GI Bill. You got this, or you got that, and what's the big deal? There's plenty of programs for veterans, but so many veterans struggle when they get out with identity because, like you said, they're used to being a part of this thing bigger than themselves, the Marine Corps, putting on that uniform, and now they have to kind of find their own way. They struggle with employment issues, with family issues, and then PTSD. It's a lot, and I feel like I've been kind of blessed with my journey as a veteran, but I've been involved with the VFW and Marine Corps League and a few other organizations where I've seen folks that have really struggled since getting out. And if it's not for folks like yourself that are reaching out to fellow veterans where they can connect and identify, then it can be really lonely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's tough stuff.
But you know what I've noticed just in our peer group, from people that you and I have served with, I really feel like, and I know that college is not for everybody, but I really feel like people who have gone and gotten an education, it doesn't have to be a college degree, but whether it's a vocational school or technical school, are faring a lot better than those who have not taken advantage of some of these benefits. And I've seen that as a trend just when I look through social media and see who's doing well and who's struggling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very true. And both the traditional route, like Corey Cody, I don't know if you remember him. He just got his MBA, and he's doing really well in South Florida. But then the non-traditional route, if you remember, there was a guy, I know it was towards the end of your career, but this was across the hall in Gun Shop. There was a guy named Taylor Garcia. He is now a helicopter pilot. You can go the non-traditional route in your education, but definitely using the GI Bill and getting some sort of an education, is the key, I think.
I also feel when I went to college on the GI Bill and connecting with other veterans in college, and also being part of a college and having that identity, like I went to Texas A&M, so I'm a huge Aggie. But I feel like having that sense of belonging again to something, was really good. It was really good for my mental health, and kind of grounded me a little bit back, from this, oh, woe is me, I have no identity. And so I feel like that also really helped me. That's why I tell people, like, I'm not using my degree, but I tell
Hannah, I've lost you.
Use it.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I lost you briefly.
Oh, I said just go for the experience, even if you're not going to use that degree, because I feel like the experience, you can't compare it to the military, but it's very similar to not an online school. Like if you can actually go to a campus and connect and feel part of something bigger than yourself,
Yeah. I mean, it's super it's key. It's
Yeah.
like you said, the Marine Corps is kind of like a family to a degree. I mean, yes, there are some bad leaders here and there, but I mean, you and I still keep in
Yeah.
touch with so many of the people that we served with because there is a family aspect to it. And
Very, very dysfunctional family.
yes, yes, very much so. But when you leave, and everybody else continues on in their own way,
Yeah.
whether they get out and move back to where they're from, or they stay in and they go to the next duty station, it
Mhm.
can sometimes be a little jarring. Now that you're a military spouse and a veteran and a mom and involved in nonprofits. I mean, you found belonging in a number of places.
Yeah.
um but that first year is extremely hard. Let me ask you, now that you're raising two children, um in a military community of sorts, right, in a military
Hmm.
environment where they're having to adjust and make new friends, because you guys are moving from time to time.
Hmm.
um how have you, because I know that this is not your first move that you're coming up on right now.
Right.
How did you balance that as a mother, raising kids in different places?
Um, so I have a daughter that is almost a teenager now, and so it's a lot harder on her. So I don't have all the answers still. I feel like we just kind of fly by the seat of our pants, and w- we the biggest thing for my kids is we try and get them involved in things as soon as we go somewhere, and that so they can make friends and feel like they're part of something.
That's
Um,
crucial.
yeah, so my daughter's a gymnast, and my son does taekwondo. Those are two things that we can find at almost every duty station.
That's awesome.
And so that's one thing. As soon as we get somewhere, we're like, all right, let's find the gym and sign them up and get them into a gym or a class, and so they can start at least being part of the community. And then I think another thing is just kids are so resilient. I
Hmm.
know it's so cliche to say that, but they truly are.
More than we
Uh,
give them credit for.
yeah, and I feel like my kids fare better in this life than I do most days because I stress out about everything, and I'm a planner, meaning I have to know, you know, what's going on a month ahead of time.
Hmm.
And my kids they're go with the flow, and I can always tell when they're a little anxious. Like this week is, things are coming down off the walls, and I know they're coming home from school and things are changing, and they're having to say goodbye to friends, and I can tell they're a little bit anxious about that because they're acting out a little bit, they're moody. And but just being able to recognize that. And I know Nick and I were talking last night because our kids are not themselves lately. They're a little bit more irritable, and it's easy as parents to want to punish them and discipline them. And he was like, I really had to step back because I know they're going through a lot of changes right now. And I think just recognizing that is helps us navigate all the transitions. And another thing is, I've talked to a lot of military brats who are now adults, and they are like, I'm so, not a single one has said that they hated being a military brat. They were all grateful for the experience, and they feel like that experience made them better adults when it comes to communication and connecting with people. And
Right.
so, yeah, so I have big hopes and dreams for my kids.
Well, they seem amazing. Everything you've shared about them is just truly inspiring. I'm trying to do even half as good as you guys have done with my daughter.
I
So
know, she's so
uh,
cute.
I'm incredibly proud to have served with you and to have learned from you. I feel like you take on the leader role naturally, whether you want to or not, whether you really
Oh.
want to be in that role or not, but you just really do. And I would imagine that other military spouses look to you, for support and for advice and for a number of things because you've served. Because when their spouse is deployed, they know that not only have you been in their shoes, but you yourself have been deployed. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I guess, wisdom comes with experience, right? So there's a lot of wisdom that you carry with you
You can say old. It's fine.
Well, I mean, I don't even think you're really any older than I am. Because I joined late. That's
Yeah.
but perhaps I'll tell you, I'm very, very, very proud of you guys. And inspired.
Thank
And
you. Well, I'm
I'll
proud of you too. I have to say that. I told you that, but I have loved like seeing your journey as well, and I think you're
Thanks.
doing great.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So if anybody wants to follow you on social media, I know you do a lot for the military community, and for the veteran community, and your journey is just really, really cool. If anybody wants to follow you, where can they find you on social media?
On Instagram, I'm Semper Ag, like Semper-Fi, but Semper and then Ag, AG, like Aggie, and then blog, which I have not written in my blog in like 2 years, but Semper Ag is taken. So that's just what we're going with. And then,
Gotcha.
Gosh, this is so embarrassing, but on TikTok, I'm Semper Ag on TikTok. I'm going to tell you something because my husband has a woodworking business, and we post woodworking stuff on there, and then some content about military life on there too. And somehow my account has blown up. So I have like 67,000 followers on TikTok.
You are TikTok famous. Are you doing TikTok dances? Is that what's
No,
going on?
I am not doing dances. But we do talk about some serious things on there. It's a great platform. Like I've talked about, Nick's very open about he has traumatic brain injuries, which is linked to PTSD. And so we've talked a little bit about that on there with some making cool videos. And then a lot of his woodworking is on there. And then we generally just make fun of veteran life. So.
Yeah, there's a lot to poke fun at there.
Yeah.
I definitely want to have Nick on eventually.
Yes, you need to have him on.
I want to hear some of what he's gone through, so that any veterans listening don't feel alone. Because I feel like if they can hear from somebody that has felt what they've felt and gone through what they've gone through, there's a connection there. So if he could share some of his stories from Fallujah, and then also to promote the woodworking business, because Bell's Old Glory is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I've been following it. I'm dropping hints. See if Natalie places an order around Father's Day. But yeah, really and truly impressed with what you guys have going on. I wish you guys the very best in Monterey, and I'll definitely have to have you guys on again sometime.
Yeah, of course.
All righty. Thanks. And that'll do it for another episode of the Know It's Some podcast. My thanks again to our guest, Hana Romer, for not just her time, but being willing to share her story and kind of open a lot of eyes to the sacrifices that are made by enlisted and commissioned service members. Combat veterans and service members face a lot of struggles, and I think this raises a lot of awareness to what those struggles can look like and how we can overcome them. Your story is extremely inspiring, and I suggest everybody check her out at Semper Ag Blog. Definitely worth a social media follow there. If you haven't already, please go and leave us a 5-star ranking on Apple, folks. Those of you who have done so already have helped us tremendously in booking interesting guests for the future. We have a lot of great guests coming up, and I can't thank you enough for the support. It's amazing to see the podcast climb the charts the way that it has. And then lastly, we are on social media. Know It's Some Pod on Twitter, Know It's Some Pod on Instagram, and now Know It's Some Pod on TikTok. I feel like I'm 86 on there. Give me some time to bring you guys some great content. The good thing is I only have 2 followers, so I can't really embarrass myself too much just yet, but go ahead and follow us on there. I really appreciate all the support. See you next week.